Took a minute to get the recording going. I don't know why that was being weird. I am very excited to bring to you all an opening night recap, not just from my annoying ass, but two of us to annoy you this morning. I am Dan Vespers. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm joined by what is now a recurring Wednesday morning recording slot, and nothing, by the way, has made me happier over the last month. But it's my good dude, my man, Matt Lawson, NBA Dynasty ADP. We're going to play a little what's real and what's not from 2 games on opening night, and we already got a laundry list of things to go over. But Matt, basketball's here. Basketball's here.
Dan, we are so incredibly back. I am thrilled. I had 2 games going on at the same time last night, and it nothing felt better. No more joy could come to my heart than having real NBA basketball.
Until there's 12. Until
exactly.
there's 12 at the same time.
And that's going to break my brain because I'm going to have as many screens going as I can. But let me tell you, we've all got that friend, associate, colleague, just annoying person in our life who anytime you bring up the NBA, they say, oh, I liked it when they play defense. They don't play defense anymore. Go put Rockets Thunder on for them. They might as well just put helmets on during that game. That was one of the most physical regular season games that you will ever see in your life. And anybody who tells you they don't play defense in the NBA, they don't play hard in the NBA, go watch the pace and the violence of that game and tell me that they don't play defense in the NBA. Such a joke. What a great game. So many interesting performances. I pray that we get that game for a 7-game series in the playoffs because it certainly just felt like we watched game 1 of the Western Conference Finals last night. That was the level of intensity that we were seeing. That was the back and forth that we were seeing of a playoff matchup. I loved it, and I can't wait to dig in on what I think is real and what's not because I think there's plenty on both sides of the ledger here.
Yep, there was a lot to sort of confuse with a double overtime clock on that game, so everybody's stats got a little bit juicy. We had weird matchups. We had game 2 where the Lakers and Warriors combined for, I think the number was 812 turnovers in the first half. Really clean basketball for the first 24 minutes of that one. But first things first, everybody hit that subscribe button. As I mentioned, you can find Matt on social, on Patreon, at NBA Dynasty ADP. I am at Dan Vespers. This show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. I think I might have screwed that up. And our friends at FanDuel and the FanDuel Sportsbook app, they put out some amazing MVP odds recently. And in a weird twist, Shea is actually the chalky favorite to repeat. There is a little bit of value there if you check that out over at the FanDuel Sportsbook. But you guys are here for the fantasy sports. Let's put the first box score on the screen. Let's look at Rockets and Thunder. Obviously, big lines are the things that jump out, but not to take anything away from like the massive line that Alperen Sengun put up. In fact, let's talk about him a little bit because normally and as the season gets going on this show and on most of the stuff that we do, Matt, that a lot of the analysts do, we focus more on the guys that are sort of bouncing back and forth between worthwhile and not worthwhile. The high draft picks are going to go out there and have really big lines, but a couple things did jump out on Sengun yesterday. Number one, he had 5 3-pointers, and number 2, he went 10 of 11 at the free throw line. How long before we know if either of those things is real?
Well, the big thing that you're going to hear this week from everybody is small sample size. You can't trust these numbers, but let's expand out because it's not like these guys just started playing basketball. Alperen Sengun has been playing a lot of basketball this summer into this fall, playing in Eurobasket, playing in the preseason, playing last night. And the trend line is consistent with a lot of what we saw, not at the level that we saw last night, but we have been seeing this shooting spike coming in the distance from him, from his play with Turkey at Eurobasket. So let's look at what it goes back to. We had 9 Eurobasket games. He was 43 for 57 from the line, 7 for 22 from 3. We also got 3 preseason games where he went 12 of 12 from the free throw line and 2 for 4 from 3. So we've got a 13-game sample size of Alperen Sengun shooting 41.1% from 3 on 2.6 attempts per game and 81.3% from the free throw line on 6.2 attempts per game. And let me tell you right now, that free throw number, especially if that can hold, if we're talking about a guy who is suddenly shooting 81% from the line, then you're at least a neutral in free throws. It's kind of similar to what you got from like Jalen Williams last year, where some weeks it's going to be a big boost and other weeks it's just going to be okay. It's not going to hurt you at all. That alone would dramatically shift Alperen Sengun's fantasy value in categories leagues, because you would suddenly be talking about a guy, if he's hitting maybe 1-3 a game and he's getting you neutral numbers from the free throw line where it's not hurting you anymore, you're now talking about an Anthony Davis kind of line where you're just trading the assists and blocks, where suddenly he's got big assist numbers, Anthony Davis doesn't. He's not going to get blocks, Anthony Davis does, but they're both impactful in those separate categories. And otherwise, the line that you're getting from Alperen Sengun looks pretty similar to AD. And that tells you we could have a potential first-round value in Alperen Sengun if that free throw shooting, if that slight uptick in three-pointers is going to be able to stick. That's what we're looking at with him, a potential first-rounder this season. And I'm going to tell you, it's not just about the box score. It's, if you watch the game, it's how he was taking those threes. He was taking trailer threes, he was taking contested threes, and he was doing it with confidence. And if you watch Sengun across his career, you would always see him hesitate when he would get the ball in the perimeter. Often there was no one near him, and he kind of hesitated. Maybe there's a shot fake. Maybe he's looking for a pass first, and eventually maybe he'll shoot it. And it was with a lot of hesitation. There was none of that last night, and that has been consistent across Eurobasket into the preseason, where suddenly we're seeing him confidently shooting that three with a quick trigger, and that makes a huge difference in what you're looking at from him, because we also know he can drive it to the basket. We saw Steven Adams setting him up with screens, a little bit of a 4 or 5 screen game last night.
So the biggest screen game ever.
If that is on the table with Sengun, we're going to see big stat lines like this all season, because the whole chessboard is open to him. If he's going to be a threat from three, if you're going to be able to have that big on big pick and roll game, this is an exciting development for this season for the Rockets, because we wondered, what is it going to look like without Fred VanVleet? Well, we got a big answer last night that a lot is going to be running through Alperen Sengun. You're going to see big gaudy assist numbers all season for him. They're going to have the ball going through him, maybe even more than we realized. And that's really exciting if you drafted Alperen Sengun in your fantasy leagues this season.
What happened with Kevin Durant yesterday? He had the 4th highest usage rate on the team. Everybody's talking about how Lou Dort was just draped on him. But, I mean, is this just a guy on a new team, like, not trying to force the issue too much? Like, my personal opinion is I would put out, I mean, it's one game, but I would try to buy as low as humanly possible on KD because he's still Kevin Durant. Are you in any way concerned about game 1?
Not at all. And I think the reality is this. Yes, he was in the torture chamber all night. Lou Dort was like literally inside of his jersey at points. His hands were all over him. He drew a ton of fouls on Dort, and that, kind of made the line a little bit wonky in itself. 0 for 4 from 3. That's not usually going to happen. And on top of that, the big encouraging thing to me was this is obviously a difficult matchup. The Oklahoma City Thunder defense is hellacious. It's amazing. But you saw at the end of shot clock, they were going to Kevin Durant, and he was getting those patented Kevin Durant mid-range jumpers. That's a lot of where his points came from. They are highly dependent on him in half court to be able to generate offense. We got a lot of it from Alperen Sengun in this game, but they're going to need Durant when things kind of fall apart, as they often will, and get a little bit clunky. They're going to turn to KD, and when they're playing against not maybe the greatest defense of all time, that's going to lead to a lot of fantasy production. So zero concern on KD. You're not going to have many sub 20% usage games from Kevin Durant going forward this season. There's no reason to panic. You hold and enjoy, because there's going to be a really big offensive role and a lot of that patent Kevin Durant efficiency that you're going to be getting out of this season.
All right, so those are, and obviously Amen Thompson is the other big name there, but I don't think anybody saw anything that would make them panic, anything that would make them go, hooray. That's sort of like there's almost like no massive story there. Although, is there anything you want to add on Amen Thompson? I like the 5 assists.
I love to talk about Amen Thompson, so let me give you this.
I know you do.
I like the fact that, we are winning Amen Thompson truthers, because the fact that the response to Amen going 18, 5, and 4 with a steal and a block is kind of like, that was all right.
Yeah.
Like that's where we're at this point. And let me tell you, this was kind of a game of two halves for him, because in the first half, they left him wide open at 3. He didn't make them. He had one that was almost a 3, but his foot was on the line. He made that one. Otherwise, it was a bunch of corner threes that he didn't make. It didn't look horrible. They weren't awful misses, but it wasn't falling. And then Amen Thompson decided at a certain point in the third quarter, I'm just going to drive on these guys. And he took Cason Wallace to the bucket. He took Aaron Wiggins to the bucket. He was getting the floater. He was getting contested layups. He discovered what a lot of players with this kind of athleticism eventually realized, the Russell Westbrooks, the Giannis's of the world, the total freaks, that they can just go to the rim, especially with the room that they're given. If you let him get ahead of steam on a drive because you're playing back and letting him take the shot, That's too much space. And once men started using that space, he was super efficient at getting to the basket, getting to floater range, and converting. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think this double big lineup is a little bit of an issue for him in the sense that he can't hang out in the dunker spot the way that he did a lot of last season. But there will be lineups where he's able to do that. That's just going to be a little bit less of what he's doing. But if you drafted Amen Thompson, you saw a big lead on ball role. You saw him really continue to have that defensive impact that's going to generate defensive stats. 5 deflections, 9 contested shots. He was a big part of the reason why Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had nothing going in the first half. He was picking him up 3/4 away up the court, even if he didn't have the ball. They were blitzing SGA. They were trapping him. They were making sure they were running zone to be able to prevent him from getting into his drive game. They were doing everything possible to be able to prevent it, and Amen was the tip of the spear on that. So this was a good Amen Thompson game and an encouraging one. And again, take everything with that grain of salt that this was against Oklahoma City, and they were still able to do this. So I think some huge stat lines are coming. I think we're going to see some triple doubles from Amen Thompson this season. It's going to be a big year for him.
Left with a calf cramp late in that game. Doesn't sound like this is anything that they are remotely concerned about. And now we get to the part, and I know that this is like the fantasy sicko way to say it. Now we're getting to the part that I actually really love about fantasy sports, which is all these guys that weren't drafted in the first 2 rounds. And Houston has like 4 of them that were all worth paying attention to yesterday. Reed Sheppard, Tari, Jabari Smith Jr., I think all deserve at least a moment here on the podcast. The one that jumps out first, I think, is Steven Adams, who we saw start in these jumbo package lineups for the Rockets. And we were all kind of wondering, like, is this the thing they're really going to run? And if they do, and I even tweeted about it, I was like, I don't think Steven Adams played more than about 24 minutes. Whoops! He played 37 yesterday. So I got that one way off. His line wasn't particularly impressive, but and he fouled out, or he didn't foul out, excuse me. He had, I think he was at 4 fouls yesterday. That's a ton of minutes. That's way more than I expected. Is this a real thing? Because I went out and I picked up Steven Adams in a few spots because I'm like, look, if this is real, I don't want to miss a potential center playing full center minutes. That's just not something you can leave on the wire.
Yeah, this is real. The double big lineup is what Ime Udoka is going to prefer to do. And we saw that in the preseason. They had a dress rehearsal preseason game against the Pelicans. That was not a double big lineup they were going against the Pelicans. They barely have a center to be able to put up against the double big lineup. And they dominated the offensive glass against the Pelicans in that preseason game, absolutely blew them off of the court. And you can already tell that that's what Udoka would prefer to do. Go back and watch the game. Amen Thompson has 7 3-pointers, misses all of them. Nearly every single one was offensive rebounded by Jabari Smith Jr., Alperen Sengun, or Steven Adams. So even though Amen was missing them, they were still getting an extra possession. They were getting a putback, or they were kicking it back out to be able to restart the possession. That is why you get this advantage. This is why teams are doing this, because you can win the possession game by dominating the offensive boards. Adams and Sengun are going to be able to do that. Jabari Smith Jr. is going to be able to do that. You saw that with all 3 of them. They generated, I think, 12 offensive rebounds across the 3 of them. It was exactly what the Rockets are looking to do schematically for a half-court offense that is just not going to be that strong most nights. And when they don't have it, when they aren't hitting threes, they're still going to be able to have that advantage. With Adams, I think that the big encouraging thing was Clint Capella was not a threat to his minutes here. We had a really small role from Capella, less than 8 minutes, and I think there was some concern when they signed Capella as well. How is this going to work? Are they going to be limiting Adams' role? Are they going to kind of split this even in the double big lineups? Are going to get a minute split? That wasn't the case, and I don't think it's going to be. Capella's minutes were not particularly strong, and I think Adams is going to continue to start most nights because of the advantage it gives them on the glass.
Are you picking him up?
I like him at least as a rebound streamer, and depending on format, I don't think you're going to get a lot other than the chance of double-digit rebounds every single night. That's going to be super impactful for you. But if that fits into your lineup, if that's an area where you either are building on strength or trying to cover up for weakness, I think Adams is going to be reliable, and you're going to get that production night after night from him.
I would hope that a defensive stat sort of falls into his lap at some point. What do you make of Jabari Smith Jr.? Played big minutes. He was pretty involved on offense. Certainly more so than Tari Eason, who we'll get to in a second. Is this a situation where Jabari Smith Jr. was just outplaying Eason? Could that minute split pivot a different direction? What did you see from that kind of wingy, I guess to be like the small forward on this team position battle from night one?
I mean, the nice thing about Jabari Smith Jr. over Tari Eason is that Jabari Smith Jr. plays within structure. He's a more consistent shooter than Tari Eason, and he's able to just kind of fit in around this Rockets core. And that is exactly what he did on this night. I mean, it was a lot of what we've seen from Jabari, just slightly improved. A lot of catch and shoot threes. Had a couple plays where it was a couple of dribbles instead of just maybe 1 or 0. And that was improvement for Jabari because last year his handle didn't really allow him to go anywhere on the court. We saw some improvement in that in preseason, some buzz out of training camp that he had progressed in his offensive game a little bit. We saw some flashes of that in this one, a couple of drives where he was able to get into the lane to be able to get a look and get advantage on his defender. So I'm really encouraged on the minutes ceiling and floor here. I think he's going to get the majority of the minutes on any given night. You're going to see 30 plus from him, and that's going to be able to give him top 100 consistent production, I think, because he's a pretty good weak side shot blocker. You're going to get some of that. You're going to get some threes. I think the scoring is going to be up a little bit this season, and the percentages aren't going to hurt you. So Jabari is a nice play, especially in roto formats. Not going to pop with really big box score lines, but certainly a guy who's going to be steady and I think have a steady role this season.
What about the sort of the buzzier names going into the season? Reed Sheppard and Tari Eason, who we just mentioned sort of in passing. Eason just 22 minutes, Sheppard 28. Again, this was a double overtime game, so some of those numbers could potentially even be smaller, although, you know, there does feel like, given the sheer size of this team, feeling out the minutes on a night-to-night basis could be a little bit interesting. I wasn't super high on Reed Sheppard. I don't think, if I'm remembering, that you were ultra high on him either. I was very high on Tari Eason when he was getting drafted in the 140s. I was sort of medium high on him when he got pushed up near 100. This was, by all accounts, a very disappointing game for Tari Eason. I didn't expect much more than this. Your feelings on what you saw from those two guys on night one?
Yeah, let's start with Reed Sheppard, and we'll be blunt here. He was not very good tonight. And I think that it comes with the caveat that this is a nightmare matchup for a small, young guard. And he was put in a difficult position and targeted heavily by the Oklahoma City Thunder, especially as he had to play more minutes when a man came out. They were looking to be able to attack him, even if they were the Rockets were playing out of zone. They were still trying to get SGA near him to be able to attack him. It was a situation where it was good to see him get up 7 3-pointers. All but one of them was above the break. He looked a little rushed in getting them off, and he was not very fluid in taking some of the deeper threes. He was short on all of them. It looked like he was pushing his shot a little bit. I did not like that, but the volume was good, because that's always been the issue with the Reed. Even at Kentucky, the 3-point volume was not necessarily at the level that you would expect for a guy who has a reputation as an elite shooter. He was super efficient at Kentucky. That was the pedigree that he came in with, but the volume wasn't at the level that it needed to be. We're seeing that at the very least. 2 3-pointers, a steal, and a block. This is the fantasy stat set of why everyone likes Reed Sheppard so much in fantasy. He's going to be able to generate defensive stats. We saw 5 deflections from him in this game, which suggests that bigger steal totals are going to be coming in the future. And I think there's going to be a longer leash for him because the front office wants Reed Sheppard to develop and play. I don't think Emi Udoka wants to play Reed Sheppard this much. And I will not be surprised if 10 games in, we start seeing more Aaron Holiday. I think the double big lineup is at least a concession to Udoka to be able to let him do what he wants with this lineup. But we saw Reed right away coming off of the bench. We saw more of him than I think they wanted to because of Thompson cramped up. They had a team worst 93 offensive rating with Reed Sheppard on the court last night. It was rough. And he was giving up buckets, not just to SGA, but Cason, Wallace, and Lou Dort were taking him off of the dribble. And that's a real problem. And if he's that much of a liability, the shooting needs to be elite for the juice to be worth the squeeze to have him on the court. I think there's a lot of danger here in redraft. You can hold a little bit longer to be able to see how the minutes hold, how it improves. But I would have a little bit of caution with that. For Dynasty, I'm still a Reed Sheppard believer because of the fantasy stat set and the fact that he's a young guard. It takes time for them to be able to figure out their place defensively, and I think he has really active hands. He's a good processor of the court. He's going to figure some things out over time. He just doesn't look strong enough to be able to stay out there defensively, and that's the reality of the NBA right now. You have to have an immense amount of strength to be able to withstand what offensive players are allowed to do to you when they are driving the basketball, the way they're able to put their shoulder into you, a forearm into you. If you don't have that and you just get blown back, it's over already. And that's where Reed Sheppard is right now. And it's going to take years for him to be able to get into a place where that's not the case, if it does at all. With Tari Eason, We saw this from Tari in 4 games against Oklahoma City last year. This is a terrible matchup for him. He only averaged 20 minutes a game, I think, against them last year, only 8 points per game. He was minus 17.5, or the Thunder or the Rockets were minus 17.5 with him on the court in 4 games against Oklahoma City. The chaos of the Oklahoma City matchup isn't a match for Tari Eason's game, because his offensive game is a little chaotic. His defensive game is creating chaos, but this is a guy who the pace and the ferocity of this matchup just for some reason completely breaks his brain, and he has played extremely poorly against them. I think there will be a big bit bounce back for Tari. There are better matchups ahead for him. This is definitely a guy where I'm holding. If you're able to get him, you got him at a pretty nice ADP. And I think that he's going to have some really productive minutes and games ahead for him. You just forget about this one. And this is where the vividness of these island games can end up impacting people for the rest of the year. There are people who this is going to be the only Tari Eason game they watch for a long time, and their opinion of him is now shot because everybody watched this game, and he might just drop to your waiver wire. This is going to be an opportunity to be able to scoop him up for free. I think there's going to be good games ahead for Tari. I really liked him in drafts this year. Nothing about last night changes that.
That to me, and we're going to talk about the other 4 teams as well, but I thought the Rockets were, from a fantasy standpoint, far and away the most interesting thing that happened on opening night. Matt, briefly here, remind everybody where they can find you and your stuff before we get into the other 3 teams, which I promise listeners, there aren't as many players we need to cover on the other clubs.
Check me out on social at NBA Dynasty ADP. You'll find links to my Patreon, where I just posted in the last week my notes on all 30 NBA teams for free for you to be able to check out what I think the opening week rotations are going to look like. What are the important notes for players on those teams where I think breakouts and sleepers could be for this upcoming season. If you want to get deep into teams, understand where things may be headed once we have more injuries, once we have players' roles shifting a little bit. If you want to get ahead of your entire league, I think this is the best 5,000 words that you're going to be able to read in this preseason, period before everything gets started up tonight for opening night for most of the NBA coming up on Wednesday night. This is going to be the opportunity to be able to get ahead of everybody else. And then on top of that, on my Patreon, you're going to be able to find dynasty rankings, redraft rankings, if you're still somehow drafting into the last second or a little bit late, and trade calculators, rookie draft rankings, all the resources that if you come from the fantasy football space that you expected to be able to find when you started playing dynasty fantasy basketball, and then you realized almost none of it exists. I'm putting it out because I want to be able to make this fun. I want to make it accessible, all of it available on a free trial. Go ahead and check it out, and you can win your league. You're going to get the opportunity to be a step or 5 ahead of everybody else.
Might as well be 5. OKC. I think really the main questions coming into this game were, what was Cason Wallace going to look like this season? Because he was a popular late grab, and I feel really good about having him on like 80% of my rosters right now. And this is sort of a 2-parter, I guess, but how long is Jalen Williams going to be out? And then is there any one guy that steps into the Jalen Williams, not role necessarily, but enough stuff to clear the ad line? And the answer to the first one of those was amazing start for Cason Wallace. Obviously, a double overtime game helps the numbers, but you couldn't ask for anything more. You're probably not going to get 14 points nightly. You're almost definitely not going to get 7 rebounds and 5 assists nightly. The steals is the thing you're kind of sitting on there. Talking to Matt Lawson here on this opening night recap show, Isaiah Hartenstein fouled out. He'll be fine. Chet Holmgren got off to a really hot start. Great. Shea got off to a slow start, but then he turned into Shea before the game was over. Everything felt like it kind of went according to plan, other than Alex Caruso played 30 minutes on opening night. Aaron Wiggins, who I think a lot of us thought would play more, only played 20, but we're digging into the streaming world a little bit there. Matt, what did you take from watching this game in real time? What do you think is going to happen with the Jalen Williams minutes over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think that Cason Wallace is going to get the opportunity to be able to continue in an expanded role while Jalen Williams is out. I'm hoping the next couple of weeks we're going to get Jalen Williams back. There is some talk that that's going to be the case, that this is going to be a prolonged absence, but Oklahoma City is a kind of a black box where we never get real information from them. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But with Cason, the defensive impact was what we expected. He had 4 steals. He recovered 3 loose balls. He contested 9 shots. He was all over the court. The real surprise was Cason getting up 8 threes. And if that kind of volume is something that's going to bring to the table, we need to remember also that Isaiah Joe was out here, so he's filling in a little bit of that role as well. And we saw some nice drives from Cason as well, where he collapsed the defense, kicked out to an open shooter for 3. If he's able to do that, That is really what he was replacing with Jalen Williams out, because they don't have a lot of that in the lineup other than SGA, someone who, can play on the perimeter, drive, create advantage, and kick it out to an open shooter. Cason did that a couple times for some made threes. I think that was a big development for his game. This is a guy who's often like a single-digit usage player. We saw the usage tick up a little bit. And that offensive expansion, if we have that from Cason, even if the minutes drop back down when Jalen Williams returns, and a guy, if he's playing minutes in the mid to upper 20s, this is good. This can be top 100 value because of the steal rate. And he's going to be able to produce a lot of steals. If we see some offensive expansion on top of that, that's where we get some of that Dyson Daniels potential here, because this is kind of it's somewhat similar player archetype, somewhat similar fantasy game. And Dyson was that guy who was kind of lingering in the New Orleans bench. Sometimes the minutes would jump up and it would pop a little bit. And then obviously it exploded last year in Atlanta. I think we're eventually going to get that from Cason. I don't know if we're going to get it this season. I think there's going to be some point where they move on from Lou Dort and Cason Wallace kind of ascends into the starting lineup in bigger minutes. And that's where we could see the real breakout from Cason Wallace. But for now, even in a smaller role, I still think that he can have a lot of value to fantasy teams this season.
Anything else from OKC, or should we move on to the nightcap?
I just want to briefly talk about Chet Holmgren, because I think this was really interesting from Chet. In the first quarter, they were obviously all over SGA, and it forced Chet to be able to find his own shot a little bit more. And I think he made his first 7 shots, and it felt like he was just never going to miss in that first quarter. A cut to the rim for a contested layup, a nice floater in the lane. He had a turnaround mid-ranger over KD that was really nice. Big contested layup over Sengun. And I think it's that improved strength that we saw from Chet. That was something that he really worked on in the offseason that really showed out on the court. That's going to be the next step for Chet. We're seeing more and more flashes of it. I think that people kind of view him as like a supercharged Miles Turner in fantasy, where you're getting the threes, you're getting the blocks, and everything else is kind of a bonus. There's more to Chet Holmgren. There's a reason that he, in fantasy spaces, in dynasty spaces, was kind of the consensus #1 overall fantasy rookie pick in his draft class. At Gonzaga, it kind of got hidden as well because he had Drew Timme on that roster taking up a bunch of usage. But Chet came up at lower levels as a big usage guy, as a guy who had the ball in his hands a lot, who was driving to the rim, who had a little bit of a bag. And we haven't seen that fully in the NBA yet. We've seen it in flashes. I think that there's still a lot of growth potential there. It might not fully happen this season, but eventually it's going to. This is why he's kind of viewed as a consensus top 10 dynasty asset, because you have that great floor of a fantasy game that's super fantasy friendly, getting really big blocks, getting scoring in threes, good rebound production. The percentages are helpful for you. And there's an expansion that could still come beyond that, where he becomes a 20-plus point per game scorer and really takes everything to a different level. I think we're going to see a little bit of that from Chet, especially in this period where we don't have Jalen Williams out there. More usage, more opportunity for him to be able to expand his offensive game.
Our friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook app have a lineup for Charlotte and Brooklyn. I thought it'd be funny to throw that one out there, because that's the game that fantasy analysts are going to be watching, even if nobody else is. Charlotte favored by 5.5. That feels like a gigantic number, but also Brooklyn is going to be very bad, and Charlotte is going to be trying to win this year. If you want to get down on that barn burner of a game, you can do it at the FanDuel Sportsbook app or sportsbook.fanduel.com. I'm just having fun over here at this point. I know nobody's actually watching that ball game, but we will be. Let's talk about the nightcap. Warriors and Lakers. Warriors, honestly, can we say the Jimmy Butler Warriors from yesterday? Because he and Draymond Green were the biggest difference makers in that ball game. But let's talk about the Lakers first, because I think they're a pretty easy one. Not a ton to take away. Deandre Ayton, kind of a quiet first game, but 34 minutes. That has to be the encouraging number for anybody that drafted him. He will do more as the season goes. Luka was a monster. Skinny Luka looks amazing, although did he tweak a groin late? Unclear. Austin Reeves took a little while to get his legs underneath him, but he looked solid. My main takeaways from the Laker game was Rui Hachimura presumably will get more than 6 shots in 35 minutes. If he's playing 35 minutes a night, it feels like he's probably streamable while LeBron is out. And then DeAndre Ayton is obviously kind of like your very simple hold. Is there anything super obvious about the Lakers we need to deep dive before we kick the tires on a Warriors team where we did actually see a few interesting things?
I think this was a night that confirmed a lot of priors on the Los Angeles Lakers, and it was kind of just a three-point shooting variance night where they couldn't hit threes, and that ultimately sunk them, bringing within 4 late in the game. They at least fought, but it seemed like a game where the Warriors were content to kind of let Luka Doncic exhaust himself and puffing up his scoring and his box score.
Nice.
But and which is great for fantasy. But you kind of they obviously did not think that the Lakers supporting cast was going to be able to do enough to be able to keep up, and they were right in that sense. Austin Reeves looks really good. I think Luka and Austin Reeves are going to have big seasons. I thought that before the season. Nothing about last night changed that in any way. But I think the big disappointment, and I guess I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed. Deandre Ayton, just the lack of physicality from him continues to show through. You don't just flip that switch. And it obviously was an issue in Portland. He looked like he barely wanted to make contact with anyone. The most hilariously low free throw rate that you've ever seen for a 7-footer in your life. And he's still playing that way. He barely makes contacts on screens. He doesn't roll completely to the rim. He'd rather just kind of hang out in floater range and maybe take his mid-range jumper. It's so disappointing because of the opportunity that Ayton has with Luka Doncic. And you see it with someone like Jackson Hayes, who's not nearly as talented as DeAndre Ayton, but Luka clearly likes to play with them more. And at least they have that chemistry at this point that they played together last season. Hayes is talking about playing for the Slovenian national team and getting a passport to be able to play for them. So Luka actually has a big man to throw lobs to. But we need, even if Ayton is playing these big minutes, we need him to be more committed in these minutes. And we didn't see it last night. I think that in a lot of ways it showed why this is a good short-term fix for the Lakers. They got him on a cheap contract. They get to be able to fill that big hole that they had at center last season. But I need to be able to see a little bit more of the DeAndre Ayton that we saw in the best moments in Phoenix. And there was some hope that maybe Luka and LeBron were going to be able to bring that out of him. Maybe when LeBron returns, we'll be able to see some of that. But night one was not encouraging for the DeAndre Ayton experience this season.
No, I think he'll be okay. I mean, for a guy who doesn't much care for physical contact, Draymond Green is not going to be your favorite matchup on earth either. Warriors. So the Warriors, we did get some stuff out of this one. We don't need to deep dive Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. Obviously, both of them had really good games. Jimmy looked great. Motivated Jimmy Butler is a scary thing for opponents. Guys to key in on here. Jonathan Kuminga, 17, 9, and 6, 4 threes, and a steal. Brandin Podziemski, 7 and 7 in his 33 minutes on the court. Not super worried about the fact that Buddy Hield got hot for 22 minutes. That's, you get hot, you hit 5 3-pointers. Don't care that much about that. Matt, what did you see from the Kuminga, Brandin Podziemski night one experience that made you think whether these are things that can either get better if you're looking at the Podziemski side, because he basically was sort of uninvolved in this ball game, and Kuminga, who suddenly had 4 threes and 6 assists on his ledger. Was there anything that made it look like this is sustainable? I mean, I don't know how you can let a line like that go by, even if we know who Jonathan Kuminga really is from a fantasy standpoint. Like, night one, you kind of have to play the what-if card. So what did you see?
This is kind of the polar opposite of what I just said about DeAndre Ayton, because I think we did actually see some things that we've been waiting to see and wanting to see from Jonathan Kuminga, that Steve Kerr has been waiting to see and wanting to see from Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, obviously he hit his corner threes and they were lightly contested at best, and that's just going to happen some nights. The release still looks slow. I think the shot's still a little bit flat. I'm not terribly encouraged that we're suddenly going to see Jonathan Kuminga hitting 4 threes a night regularly. But the fact that he was making passes within the flow of the Warriors offense, that we saw him making smart passes off of his drives instead of having tunnel vision and just throwing something up at the rim, which he so repeatedly has done in his career so far, that he got into the DHO game with Steph, that it felt like Jonathan Kuminga was finally playing the Warriors style of basketball in moments last night. And that is a massive development, because that has been the number one thing that Steve Kerr has been harping on, that he needs to fit in. And despite his gifts, despite his ability to be able to be the size that he is, have his athleticism, and to be able to drive and get to the rim the way that he does, they want him to play a certain style of basketball. It's the Steph style of basketball that he's been playing his entire career. We saw some of that last night. We saw him hit the boards last night. That is a big development, because that is not what we have seen from Jonathan Kuminga in his career. He has the physical ability to do it. He has not wanted to do it, or he's just not done it. And we saw it last night. If that is a development, that could be massive for his playing time. That's exactly what they want him to be. They want him to be Sean Marion. They want him to be Aaron Gordon. They want him to be a guy who could do more with the ball, but does less and plays within structure to be able to make the team better as a whole as a result. And I think the big thing for Kuminga is, what does it look like as this rotation thickens a little bit. We don't have Moses Moody available in this game. We don't have D'Anthony Melton yet. We know Kerr is going to want to play both of those guys. This is also a threat to Podziemski as well. And that's the big takeaway that I have with the Warriors in this game. We know Jimmy, Steph, Draymond, that's set. I don't feel great about a lot else on this roster because I know that Steve Kerr is going to be playing with these lineups. I know it's going to be matchup dependent. I know there could be 12-man rotations on some nights. Heck, we got Will Richard, rookie out of Florida, and Belmont coming in playing last night, playing almost 14 minutes. That is going to be a huge issue to get any consistent value out of anyone other than their big three. Even Al Horford playing a smaller role, and Steve Kerr talking about how he wants to limit the minutes on Al. And that makes sense. They're going to play Al like 30 minutes a night in the playoffs if they're able to get there. That's going to be the plan. If they can get away with having Al in lower 20s minutes throughout the regular season, not playing him on back-to-backs and preserving him, bubble wrapping him until they can get to the playoffs, they would love to be able to do that. And I think Al's going to be great once they get into playoff basketball, but you're probably going to see a lot of Quentin Post. There's going to be some nights where Trace Jackson-Davis is going to get to play. You're going to have Draymond Green. They're going to try to limit his center minutes a little bit as well. So get ready to be frustrated because this is what we know we get from Steve Kerr. I'm not looking to invest heavily in any of these bench guys, any of these kind of fringe starter guys, just because I know what's coming ahead with Steve Kerr.
Do you think, and this is going to be the question that everybody will ask, so we have to plant our flag on it. Do you think Kuminga and Brandin Podziemski belong on 12-team rosters?
I would hold Podziemski right now because I think that the minutes are going to be consistent enough for him, even when Moody comes back. With Kuminga, I'm a little bit more skeptical. I am willing to add right now in the early season for your last roster spot to see what is sticky from this early game production. If he's going to change the way that he plays, and we're going to see a different Jonathan Kuminga, the minute ceiling could go up a lot. If he's going to be consistently hitting some corner threes, that changes everything for his fit with Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. And the more overlap that he can have with them, if he's playing within the offense, if he's hitting the boards hard, if he's doing all the little things, if that continues beyond just night one, Jonathan Kuminga could play 30 minutes a night. And then you have something there because we've got an expanded stat set based on that difference in style of play. This is a guy who can be really impactful on nights where he's hot. If he's got a team that doesn't have good rim protection, he's going to just be getting to the rim repeatedly, and that gravity is going to create a lot for others, and maybe everything finally comes together for him in year 5. But I would only be doing it to be able to see in these first couple of weeks what that looks like, because I could very easily see the rug being pulled out by us by both Kuminga and Kerr, and it starts to go back to the way that it looked in previous seasons where the coaches don't trust him and he doesn't trust the coaches.
Yeah, and I think if I'm remembering right, Kuminga's had like 2 really, really good games in the last 25 or 30, and they've both come against the Lakers, if I'm remembering right, because I always have Laker games on in the background here because I'm trying to indoctrinate my children into Los Angeles sports. There's a thing that needs to happen in this house. So yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think you have to add after seeing night 1, but just understand that this might also be the high water mark. And most teams have somebody that they're willing to cut. The guys I cut last night to make some of these speculative ads were guys that I had on my roster because I figured they would be what I refer to affectionately as burger board plays, which is the injury replacement types. Like, I think Grayson Allen's going to get off to a nice start this year with no Jalen Green. I don't think Grayson Allen is going to last past a Jalen Green return, at least not in like a really productive set. So I'm fine with that type of drop if you're looking for someone that maybe has a little longer appeal, because ultimately you can probably replace a burger board guy with a different burger board guy. But Matt, we've almost used up all of your time for today. Just very quickly, if possible, so that you can, we laughed about it before I hit the record button. You do have to be an adult for part of your Wednesday. 12 games on the docket tonight. How should fantasy players approach the massive Wednesday card? It's a complicated thing because you're going to see took us 35 minutes to talk about 2 games. We're going to have 6 times that going tonight.
Yeah. Number one, if you have players that you've got on a lot of your fantasy rosters that you had questions about, that you were unsure of what it was going to look like, you believed in them. That's why you drafted them, but you still had questions. Those are the players that you want to check in on. What does their role look like? You need to be able to understand what these rotations look like. So for all these different games, what are the starting lineups? Are there any surprises? And then once you're able to start watching games, you want to check in on the players that you really had focus on in your drafts this season to be able to see what it's looking like for them so you can make informed decisions with your roster going forward. But coming out of it, once all the dust is settled on this, what I like to be able to do is find the outliers, find the things that surprised you, go through the box scores, go back to the games. I mean, if you've got League Pass, go check in on some of these players to be able to see how did they get to those points? How did they get those assists that I didn't expect? Why does this guy have 3 blocks tonight? Where did that come from? And you're trying to filter out what's real and what's not. We're going to help you be able to do that. We did that in this show, but we're trying to teach you how to fish as well. So the big thing is avoid just looking at the box score on its face and making all of your judgments from that. You need to get under the hood to be able to determine what is real and what is not in this early season, because some things will be. If you go back to last year, there's some stuff that popped in the first week that ended up holding the entire year, and there's plenty of it that popped in the first week. I remember people talking that Bilal Coulibaly was the big breakout of the season. Everybody thought that he was going to have a huge year because he was getting a bunch of baskets in transition, and it looked like he was going to explode. And none of that helped. It was a complete free fall after that. And if you watched how he was doing it, you kind of understood this is probably not going to be sustainable. We're going to have plenty of that this season. I know Dan's going to be able to get you a better vision on what's real and what's not going on. I hope I get the chance to be able to do that as well with you, because this is the time where we make our money. You had a great draft. Now you got to manage the roster in season. And those early season pickups, those guys on the waiver wire, this is the best chance to be able to get someone who's actually going to stick on your team the entire season, because there are going to be breakouts that we do not anticipate. So paying extra attention in these first couple of weeks is so important. You can check out a little bit after and still win your league, depending on how competitive it is. But lock in here, and you're going to learn a lot about what is ahead for this 82-game season.
We are all on the hunt for 2019 Devontae Graham here, and week number. I had to look up the year to make sure I got that reference right. But that's like the one that I'll never forget. No one said anything about that dude, and then he played 35 minutes a game for the Hornets right out of the chute. And it was like, holy crap, this guy's going to go for 19-6 this year. And we had no idea who he was before. There's always that one guy. We do so much work leading up to the season, but Matt is 100% right. Something's going to pop, and we have to make sure we get the right one, the one that's real. Matt Lawson, NBA Dynasty, ADP on social, on Patreon. I'm so happy that we're doing this on Wednesday morning. Can we do it again next week?
I would love to. I would enjoy nothing more.
The best, Matt. Thanks, my man.
Thanks, Dan.
Friends, please hit that subscribe button. I know you enjoyed that show. I know you did. As Matt and I were hopefully able to tell you a little bit more about what's real and what's not from night one. Of course, tonight, Big Wednesday, first Big Wednesday of the year, is the most important Big Wednesday of the year, because a lot of stuff is going to happen. There are going to be overreactions. There are going to be underreactions, and we want to have proper reactions. Proper. I know. It's hard to find that midpoint, but we got to find it. A couple things to remind you guys about here at the end of the show. I do have a Patreon now. It is $1. It entitles you to nothing, but with every dollar that comes in there, that presumably will be 12 over the course of an entire year, I get this much closer to being able to say that I can do this for free for everyone forever. Forever. I'm still going to do my intermittent play-by-play, so don't be concerned if I disappear in the evenings every once in a while. But, like, obviously my goal is to be the fantasy analyst that does a ton of pods and a ton on social media, and you guys don't have to shell out 30, 40, 50, 60, $100 or whatever to get my best content. I want it to be free for everyone, and for those that have $1, you help keep it free for everyone. If you can't, if you don't have $1, that's fine. I'm going to keep doing it for free for at least this year and next year, and I'm 99% sure that we will hit our marks by then, and so then it'll be free forever. So that's the patreon.com/oldmansquad. I don't know the best way to describe it. All of this stuff is in the show description, along with my Twitter handle @DanBespris. Old Man Squad is also in the show description. FanDuel, show description. Fantrax, show description. The HOF app, show description. This YouTube channel, all the podcast feeds, show description. Please subscribe to those over there. everything that you do. Free, $1, whatever. It does help us continue to grow this thing. And we're just going to take it and we're going to keep running with it. Thank you to all of you guys for listening. Big thank you to Matt Lawson, NBA Dynasty ADP, for jumping on and giving us all the deep dive stuff on night number 1. I am Dan Vespers. We'll be back in a little bit with a big Wednesday preview show. We're not going to do all of these. We're not going to do a ton of individual night preview shows, but because so many teams, 24 teams, are playing their first game tonight, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of things to watch for. That won't be a long show, 20, 25 minutes max, but it'll be really important as you guys are making decisions later on tonight on who your drops and ads might be as a result of what takes place out on the court. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Like, subscribe, rate, review. I'll see you soon, everybody.